Doctors and nurses. Have you ever witnessed a couple have a child that was obviously not the father's? If so, what happened? Story 1. Not a doctor or nurse, but my ex-girlfriend delivered a baby while I was in the delivery room. And turns out, it wasn't mine. She was 16, I was 15. All along, I was under the impression that this kid was mine, and time to be an adult. Took all the classes, read the books, and worked every night and weekend to save whatever money I could as a 15-year-old. I finally get the call she is in labor, so I have somebody rush me to the ER. Luckily for her, it wasn't a long labor, only about 6 hours, but there was a complication. The baby came out with the umbilical cord wrapped around its neck. The doctor assured us it was going to be okay, but the nurses were prepping for things to go south. Baby comes out, it's a light shade of purple, and the nurses immediately take the baby and put on the smallest mask you have ever seen to help it get the oxygen, I guess. I was too panicked to ask a lot of questions. They state the need to keep the baby on watch overnight, so I stay in the room with the ex. The next evening, the baby is back in the room with us, and all seems well. The ex is asleep, and the same nurse from the night before comes into the room and beckons me out. She states that at risk of losing her job, she has to break some harsh news to me. That kid is not mine. She stated that while at this stage it wasn't obvious, over the next few weeks it would become clear this kid was mixed, and since both of us were white, it was a high probability that it wasn't mine. Cue a mixed bag of emotions, and me promptly waking the ex to get a little clarification. Come to find out, she knew the chances, and was just hoping it was mine because it worked better for her. Apparently her father was old school racist, and she didn't want to have to deal with that. I left the hospital to collect my thoughts, and a few weeks later was served with child support papers. One DNA test, and about 6 weeks later, I am 0.0% that kid's father. Wherever that nurse is now, I hope your life is amazing. I understand that you are not supposed to get involved in the personal side of things and keep it professional, but you saved me a lot of additional headaches. Damn, that's really up that she tried to get child support out of you, knowing that you weren't the father, and with you being 15 years old. But the effort you gave towards preparing to have a child at your age is really admirable. You're a good guy, and I really wish you the best. Thanks for sharing, and I hope you find better. Story 2. My aunt is a nurse in the maternity ward. She had a couple come in, and they were both very black. Lady has a baby, and it is white as you maximally could imagine, like totally pale with no trace of any pigment. They put the baby on her mom, and the mom starts yelling about how this isn't her baby, and they stole her baby. In all fairness, you can be very confused during and after delivery. It wasn't stupidity, just sobbing and freaking out. And the father is just sitting there and looks very confused because even he's realizing that even if she did cheat, there is no way the baby would be that white. The doctor and nurses are trying to assure her that this is her baby and that the skin usually darkens later. Come to find out, when he called his mom, she pointed out that they have a second cousin who is albino, and maybe the baby got that gene. Turns out, that's what happened. The baby was albino. Story 3. My fiance's father is almost certainly not his biological dad. His mom was just a genuinely terrible human being who didn't even try to hide the fact that she was cheating. But his dad loved him from the second he was born. And when the mom decided 4 years later she just didn't want the kid anymore, she just gave him to his dad and wrote off. Jay's dad ended up getting married, and they tried for kids before finding out his sperm count was too low to ever father children. They ended up adopting many years later. He sat my fiance down when my fiance was 13 and told him the truth, and that if Jay wanted a test, they would, but it was up to him. Jay cried and told him he just wanted him to be his dad, and that was the end of that. Reply 1. It's a good story. They've had their ups and downs like any father and son, but they're really tight now. They don't even think of themselves as anything but real father and son. It's funny to see them, though. Jay is 5'7" with blonde hair and bright blue eyes, and his dad is 6'4" with jet black hair and dark eyes. Story 4. I know a girl who is pregnant with her boyfriend's best friend's baby. He found out there was a possibility about a week before she gave birth. I went up to see her once he was born, and he looked just like the friend. There was no question. I broke the news to her boyfriend, and he was absolutely devastated. They had bought the girl everything she needed, including a $500 car seat and stroller set, but she refused to give anything back. Instead, she started up a relationship with a friend immediately after having their child, and they're still together a decade later. But the kicker for me has always been that the boyfriend and best friend were next-door neighbors. She moved into his house after coming home from the hospital. So her ex-boyfriend and his family had to see them basically every day, raising this child that they had believed to be his for the entire pregnancy. I can't even imagine. Edit. Yes, they did a DNA test right after he was born, and the baby was the friend. Wow, that's a really tough situation for the ex-boyfriend and his family. It's heartbreaking to know that they were so invested in the baby's life, only to find out the truth like that. Must have been really tough for them to see the child being raised right next door. I hope the ex-boyfriend and his family eventually found some peace and were able to move on from the situation. Story 5. I had a vasectomy. While chatting with the doctor, he told me about another patient. This guy had 3 kids and came in for the snip because he and his wife decided they were done having children. The doc opened up his sack and found nothing to snip. This guy was born without the ability to have any children. The poor doctor had to explain to him what happened. Imagine finding out that way. Reply 1. Damn, this is hardcore. Story 6. I had the opposite happen. Sort of. My wife and I are both brown-skinned, dark-haired half-Mexicans, and our moms are both 100% white blondes with blue and green eyes. So we sort of knew it was a crapshoot with our baby, but the nurse who was assisting with delivery had no idea. At one point, she gets sort of nervous and calls for help, and another, I guess more senior nurse came in and nodded and came over to talk to me. I thought there was something wrong with the baby as she comes over and stumbled through some questions. So I was the father and no one else was coming, etc. Then finally, she awkwardly asks if either of us happened to be blonde growing up. I said, yeah, I was, and both the baby's grandparents are blonde as they come. This wave of relief went over her, and she brought me over to see this blonde as hell crowning baby head. It's funny because he looks just like me if you applied an Instagram filter. We often get awkward questions about his heritage, and my wife always hits them with, yeah, we're not sure if he's mine. It's always funny to see people nod for a moment and then go, wait, what? Story 7. Had a college buddy whose fiancée was pregnant. They were the perfect couple. Both had just over a year of great careers starting out, and everything was butterflies and rainbows. Fast forward to the delivery room, they're in there, and out comes a very black baby. He's quite the pale redhead, and she's blonde and blue eyes Texas girl. He made sure everything was okay, waited for her parents to arrive, and left without saying a word. He moved all his stuff out of the house while she was in the hospital and cut off all communications with her. Just walked out of their lives in the most stone-cold act I'd ever seen. They were together for 9 years and he just left cold turkey. She tried to contact him at his job a few times, but he quickly moved up the ladder and eventually got a job in another city. He told me once that he took solace in the fact that her family had already dropped around $10,000 in a wedding that never happened. Story 8. I used to work with a guy whose wife was pregnant. Near the time for delivery, everyone at our place of business had a big party with gifts, money, etc. So a big day comes, water breaks, and they get in the car to go to the hospital. She breaks the news on the way there, it's not him. The kid is another race, and if he could just drop her off at the hospital and then leave, that would be great. He took a few days off work, found a new apartment, moved out, filed for divorce, etc. He called in to work and told someone what happened. News spread pretty fast. All congratulation cards were cleaned up and thrown away. Everyone was very sensitive to his pain, except somehow, I don't know how, I did not get the news. So on his first day back, I walked into the office he shared with 6 or 7 other guys and said, Hey, Daddy-O, how's fatherhood so far? Getting any sleep? Got some pictures? Let's see the little tyke. He slowly lifted his head to look at me with a painful look. The room was dead silent. One of his workmates stood up, grabbed my arm, and walked me out of the room, shushing me. What happened? I asked. Did it die? What's the problem? When he told me, I was about to die myself. I still feel bad for the dude, and it's been 30 years. Reply 1. I worked with this guy a few years back, and his wife was pregnant. They were super excited and shared the news with everyone and put stuff all over social media. So fast forward a few months, and the kid is unfortunately stillborn. They had a professional photographer come to the hospital, and they did a series of photos. holding the baby, dressing it up, kissing it on the head. Usual newborn photos. The bizarre thing is they put them all on Facebook. I found it kind of morbid, but whatever. I've never lost a kid, so that's cool. Story 9. I used to work in the newborn nursery at a hospital. We got the babies right from delivery, cleaned them up, footprinted them, checked vitals, etc. Dads usually came in with the newborns. This dad comes in with this baby. He is white, mom is white, and baby is very obviously not white. The dad was very quiet standing next to the baby, watching us clean it up. He says quietly, "I don't think this is my baby." You could tell he was absolutely devastated. We advised him not to sign the birth certificate until he was sure. Not sure what happened after we sent the baby back out to mom, but I felt awful for the guy. Yeah, reading this story is another great example of how life can throw unexpected curveballs at us. The father's reaction in such a delicate situation is incredibly sad, and it's essential to have supportive and understanding professionals around during times like these. I hope that everyone involved eventually found clarity and resolution, and that the father was able to process his emotions and make the best decisions for himself and the child. Story 10. Happened to my fiance's mom. Namely, his mom is a labor and delivery nurse. One time she had a patient whose parents were present during her stay at the hospital. The staff there has a whiteboard with some general information about the patients, like blood type, time spent in the wing, and how far along. This information is nameless for HIPAA reasons and instead has a patient's number. So this patient happened to be the only one in the wing at the time. Her father was walking back from the cafeteria at one point and noticed the board. He stopped one of the nurses and asked if the blood type for the patient on the board was correct. He knew his daughter was the only patient there. It was B+. The nurse confirmed it was correct. Turns out he knew his and his wife's blood type. He was O+, and his wife was A-. This combination will never yield a B+ baby. He brings his wife out and just points at the board, and this look of shock washes over her. By the way, the father of a patient in labor finds out his wife cuckolded him 25 years later by knowing his blood type Punnett squares. Story 11. Labor and delivery nurse here. Black babies are usually a lot lighter at birth. Not everyone is aware of this, so I've had a few dramatic deliveries where the father looks at the baby and accuses the mom of cheating because the baby isn't as dark. Edit. Adding a PSA or pamphlet about this subject wouldn't really help. A lot of people might be extremely offended that you assume the father of the baby would accuse their partner of cheating on them. If the father is accusing the mother of cheating right after the delivery of their child, then their relationship dynamic might not be the best to begin with. Story 12. Had a lesbian couple come in. One of them was pregnant. Neither knew. Judging from all the screaming, this information was poorly received. Reply 1. Sounds about like my life. Found out in our first divorce, hearing that she was pregnant, the judge wouldn't grant the divorce since her child was conceived during our marriage. Judge even went as far as making me wait 9 months till the baby was born and take a DNA test to prove the child wasn't mine, even though I am a woman. After almost 3 years of marriage to my wife, I caught her cheating on me with the current father to her child, late December 2016. By the first of the year, we both decided to work on our marriage and try to put everything behind us. The guy she cheated on me with was the fiancé of one of my best friends. Well, by the end of January 2017, she was still keeping her relationship with him going. So I left her and moved completely out of our house the night that I found out. I filed for divorce later that week, and around the beginning of March was our first divorce hearing. In court, the judge asked if any children were born into the marriage. We both said no. He then asked if any children were conceived in the marriage. I said no, and she agreed there had been. He then told us he could not grant the divorce since a child had been conceived and paternity had not yet been established. The entire 9 months that she carried the child, she still continued to tell me how much she missed me, yada yada yada. Even went as far as telling me the main reason I was with him was so we could have our own child together. Believe me, I wasn't idiotic enough to fall for her tricks. After 2 more court appearances and a paternity test, our divorce was granted at the beginning of this month. It was a long journey, and boy am I glad it's over. Story 13. Not quite what you're asking, but in the same vein, since I'm a nurse in a level 4 neonatal ICU. We service the sickest of the sick from our state and the surrounding states, so we see it all. We had a baby that was sick as snot. Lo and behold, we discovered its blood and spinal fluid, etc., was septic with herpes. In most babies, we avoid this by treating herpes while the mom is pregnant. In this case, the mom didn't even know she was a carrier. So where did it come from? This is the awkward and sickening moment when everyone in the room realized where herpes came from. Turns out the father had an affair and contracted the virus from his lover. So yeah, while this woman's baby is on the verge of death, she finds out her husband has been cheating on her, and his cheating act is the reason their baby is sick. Ooh, the discovery of the father's affair during an already challenging time must have been extremely hard for the mother to process. It's a reminder of how important it is to be honest and responsible in relationships, as the consequences of one's actions can have a profound impact on the lives of others. I hope the baby was able to recover and the family found a way to navigate through this incredibly difficult situation. Story 14. My best friend was dating a girl and knocked her up. They got engaged and planned to get married right after the baby was born. There were about 10 of us in the waiting room waiting for her to crank out the baby. It was essentially her parents, he was in another state, some of her friends, and some of ours. After sitting there for about 2 hours, he walks out with a smirk on his face and says, "Let's go." We all thought something horrible had happened. Her friends asked how the baby is, and he said, "Fine, but black." He motioned for us to go, so we followed him. In the parking garage, he tells us to follow him to his apartment, then sends me a text asking if I could put him up for a while. We literally moved him out of his apartment and into my spare bedroom in like an hour, tops. Her parents didn't know who to be mad at. The confusion on their faces when he told them the baby was black was priceless. Story 15. Kind of a topic, but I gotta give my friend credit for doing something I don't think I could ever do. Found out that after being married and having a 3- and 1-year-old, his wife had been cheating on him multiple times with multiple men. Anyway, when he finds that there is a chance neither of the kids is his, he buys 2 paternity tests. He brought them home, but then the horrible conclusion hit him. He was prepared if they were his. He was prepared if they weren't. He had no idea what he would do if one was and one wasn't. So he threw the tests away. They divorced. She keeps seeing people for short times, and he is now remarried to a fantastic person. Story 16. I had a test done on my son when he was about 7 months old. Baby mama constantly told me he wasn't mine, but then came after me for child support. Got the test done, and he was mine. So I hired a lawyer, and we sat and chilled. 4 months later, she's arrested on charges of distribution of meth, where my son lived, and he's been with me for the last 8 years. Edit. I was remembering events wrong here. I got my kid when he was 11 months old after DHS did a random stop or drug test on her and she failed for meth. I then started a 2-year battle in juvenile court to not allow the state to reunify with the mother. I finally got juvenile court to release my case to district court, where we fought for actual custody. During our district court battle, she took my son for a visit, and I got a call from the cops in a city an hour away that she had been arrested on a domestic with her boyfriend at a hotel, and they searched her and found needles and meth paraphernalia. That was the last time she had seen him unsupervised. We went about 2 years of her barely calling, seeing him once a month for 10 to 20 minutes, until she finally got arrested on attempt to distribute meth charges. She got out on bail and was arrested for it again 3 weeks later. She spent 3 years in state prison and has been out for about 8 months now. She appears to be clean and just gave me $100 for extra child support yesterday. She's only court appointed to pay $52 a month. So we're giving her a shot, but she is still and will remain on supervised visits for a long time. The whole fiasco has been such a blur, it's hard to remember exactly when, what, and where happened, especially after 4 to 5 years of really not having to deal with her. At the time, it was utter shit though. She punched me a couple of times, lied under oath, inappropriate photos of her with other men. The list goes on and on. I've really tried to put a lot of it behind me and forget about as much of it as I can to try and help me forgive her so she can at least be somewhat a part of my kid's life, because that's what he wants. I just watch her like a hawk now. Please leave your story down below in the comments. I would absolutely love to make a video about them in the future. And also don't forget to like and subscribe. And until next time, peace.